Here's your first sponge, actually. Hold that thought. Picture this. It's 100 AD, the sun's barely up over Rome, and your stomach is growling. You step outside your cramped apartment on the 5th floor of an insula, and within seconds, the smell hits you. Not bread, not spices, smoke, sweat, sewage, and something frying in oil that's been reused for a week. Welcome to breakfast in the greatest city on earth. And here's the thing nobody tells you in the history books. If you actually had to eat like a Roman for one single day, you would not make it. You'd be doubled over in an alley by lunch. Let's find out why. First, you need to understand something about Roman apartments. Most Romans, the regular people, the plebeians, the freedmen, the slaves, did not have kitchens. Insulae, those towering wooden and brick apartment blocks that housed the majority of Rome's population, were fire hazards. Landlords banned open flames on the upper floors because the whole building could go up in smoke in minutes. So if you lived in Rome and you weren't wealthy, you didn't cook at home. You ate out. Every single meal. Every day. That's not a luxury. That's survival. And that means your entire diet depended on the street. So, you walk downstairs, and there it is, the popena. Sometimes called a thermopolium, this was Rome's version of a fast food counter. A stone countertop built right into the street facing wall of a building, with big ceramic jars called dolia sunk into the counter. Inside those jars, stews, beans, wine, sometimes meat. And here's your first problem. Those jars sat open all day in the Mediterranean heat with no refrigeration. None, zero. Rome had ice, technically, brought down from the mountains for the ultra-wealthy. But that ice was not going into your lunch. Your lunch had been sitting in a clay pot since sunrise, uncovered, with flies landing on it freely, in 90-degree heat. You order something. Let's say it's a bowl of pulse, a thick porridge made from emmer wheat or barley, sometimes mixed with vegetables, sometimes with a bit of meat if you're lucky. This was the actual staple food of ancient Rome, more common than bread for centuries. It sounds harmless, comforting even, but think about the water. Rome's water supply came through those famous aqueducts, and yes, they were engineering marvels. But the pipes themselves, often lined with lead. Roman engineers knew lead was dangerous. Vitruvius literally wrote about it. And they used it anyway, because it was easy to work with. So the water in your porridge, the water used to clean the pots, the water in the wine you're about to drink, all of it carried trace amounts of lead poisoning, accumulating meal after meal, year after year. You wouldn't feel it today. You'd feel it in 10 years, in your bones, in your mind. Now let's talk about the meat, because Rome loved meat on a stick, sausages, grilled skewers sold from portable braziers by street vendors weaving through the crowd. Sounds great, right? Except there was no such thing as a health inspector. No refrigeration during transport from the slaughterhouse. No regulated cook temperatures. Meat sat out, got handled by unwashed hands, got reheated over the same coals used all day without cleaning. Roman writers themselves complained about it. Juvenal, the satirist, mocked the food sold to the poor as barely fit for animals. Even the Romans knew their fast food was sketchy. And you're about to eat it, because you have no other option. You're hungry, and the smell of hot fat over charcoal is the only breakfast in town. Let's talk about the wine, because you're definitely drinking it. Water alone wasn't trusted, and honestly, given the lead pipes, that instinct wasn't entirely wrong. So Romans cut their wine with water and drank it constantly, throughout the day, starting in the morning. But here's the twist that would genuinely shock you. Roman wine was often preserved and sweetened using a substance called defrutum, or sapa, a syrup made by boiling down grape mussed in lead pots. Lead pots. On purpose. Because lead acetate, which forms during that process, has a naturally sweet taste. The Romans didn't know the chemistry, but they knew it made cheap wine taste better. So your morning drink, the thing you're using to wash down your questionable porridge, is being sweetened with what amounts to a slow poison. You'd drink it without a second thought, because everyone did. It was normal. Now picture midday. You're out running errands, you're hungry again, and you pass a vendor selling fried dough, something like a honeyed fritter, dripping in fat that has been used to fry dozens of batches before yours. Rancid oil wasn't a rare mistake, it was the default. Olive oil was valuable, and vendors stretched it as far as it could go, reusing it until it turned dark and bitter, sometimes masking the taste with heavy amounts of honey or fermented fish sauce. Which brings us to garum. Garum was Rome's ketchup, its soy sauce, its everything condiment, made from fermented fish guts, salted and left in the sun for weeks until it broke down into a pungent, salty liquid. Romans put it on everything: meat, vegetables, even fruit. Archaeologists have found the remains of garum factories, and the smell alone, historians agree, must have been overpowering. Now, garum itself, when made properly, wasn't necessarily dangerous, but street-level garum, the cheap version sold to the masses, cut corners. Fish parts of questionable freshness, fermented in unsanitary conditions, sold in reused jars. You'd be dousing your entire meal in a sauce made from decomposing fish, produced with none of the food safety standards you're used to. By early afternoon, your body would already be under assault. The lead is accumulating. The bacteria from improperly stored meat and reused frying oil is working through your gut. And Roman sanitation, despite popular myth, was nowhere near as advanced as we imagine for the average street level. Yes, Rome had the Cloaca Maxima, an impressive sewer system, but most of that sewage infrastructure served public buildings and the wealthy. The actual streets, where you're eating your lunch, often had waste, animal and human, running through the gutters nearby. Vendors set up shop where foot traffic was highest, which meant right along the busiest, dirtiest thoroughfares in the city. Flies moved freely between open sewage and open food stalls. Nobody thought twice about it, because nobody had ever known anything different. Here's a detail that really drives it home. Archaeologists excavating Pompeii, frozen in time by Vesuvius in 79 AD, just 20 years before our scenario, found thermopolia with food residue still inside the jars. Analysis of these remains showed traces of animal bone, snails, fish, and grains, all mixed together in the same pots, reheated and topped up repeatedly throughout service. That's the equivalent of a restaurant never fully emptying or cleaning its pot for weeks, just adding new ingredients on top of old, day after day. Your stomach, adapted to modern food safety standards, pasteurization, refrigeration, expiration dates, would not know what hit it. By evening, if you'd eaten 3 meals the way an average Roman did, street porridge, skewered meat of questionable origin, wine sweetened with lead syrup, fried dough in rancid oil, and fermented fish sauce on everything, your gut bacteria would already be in open revolt. Modern travelers who visit regions with different food safety standards often get sick within a day or two, just from unfamiliar bacteria. Now imagine unfamiliar bacteria combined with actual toxic contamination, no antibiotics, no rehydration salts, and a Roman remedy that likely involved more wine, or, if you were desperate, a visit to a physician who believed illness came from an imbalance of bodily humors and might prescribe bloodletting. And this is the wild part. Romans weren't dropping dead in the streets from this food. Obviously, civilization functioned, armies marched, emperors ruled for centuries on exactly this diet. Their bodies adapted over lifetimes of exposure. Their gut flora built up a tolerance yours never could. Chronic low-level lead poisoning was so widespread that some historians have genuinely debated whether it contributed to long-term health problems across the Roman elite, who ironically consumed even more lead-sweetened wine than the poor. But you, dropped into 100 AD with a 21st-century digestive system, would have no such adaptation. Your body has never met these bacteria. Your bloodstream has never processed this level of ambient lead. What was simply Tuesday lunch for a Roman would be a full-blown medical emergency for you. So next time you complain about a food truck taking too long or a restaurant getting your order slightly wrong, remember this. In ancient Rome, the greatest empire the world had ever seen, with roads, aqueducts, and monuments that still stand 2,000 years later, the average person's daily lunch was a genuine gamble with contaminated water, reused oil, decomposing fish sauce, and wine laced with poison, served from a hole in a wall by someone who had absolutely no idea what a health code was. You wouldn't last a day. Not because Romans were careless, but because survival, back then, meant a tolerance for risk that modern life has completely erased from your body. And honestly, maybe that's the most Roman thing of all. They built an empire that lasted centuries, one dangerously delicious bite at a time.